Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the distinguished speakers and delegates present over here at India Smart Utility Week 2023. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session on Vision for a Net Zero Transport Sector in India, organized by India Smart Grid Forum. Government of India launched the Electric Mobility Mission Plan with an ambitious target of 5 to 7 million electric vehicles by 2020. The FAME-1 scheme launched in 2016 to 17 allotted electric buses, cars, and three-wheelers to 11 cities. Though FAME-2 commenced with large capital outlay and targets for more than 5,500 electric buses and more than 2,500 public charging stations. The program took twists and turns owing to the pandemic and is now focused on rollout of 50,000 electric buses, leveraging the good work already done in the sector by various stakeholders. It's time for setting higher goals towards decarbonization of the transport sector. I would like to invite Mr. Reggie Pillai for the welcome address.
Good morning. Transport electrification is a high priority around the world because of net zero targets fixed by different countries. And in case of India, we were one of the early movers in electric mobility. Way back in 2013, Government of India set up a electric mobility mission plan. It had a very big targets, some 4 to 6 million two-wheelers and three-wheelers, 1 to 2 million four-wheelers by 2020. So we set a big target of about 5 to 7 million electric vehicles by 2020. Although we don't have that many, we have few million three-wheelers and maybe few lakhs of four-wheelers now. Lot of this last 10 years, we gained a lot of experience, and an ecosystem which is ready to scale up is currently existing in all spheres, from the standardization, charging infrastructure, electric vehicles, both two-wheelers, three-wheelers and four-wheelers manufacturing, including buses. There are multiple OEMs which are manufacturing most things except the batteries in India. And for the battery at the cell level manufacturing also there is government program, PLI schemes. So this is an area which will totally going to revolutionize. We had done a study in Calcutta. In fact, 2017 we did a study in Calcutta. Calcutta we have taken because that's the first place electricity came. That's the first place where the electric trams were introduced more than 100 years ago. In fact, 120 years now, tram completed, that still runs. And all modes of transport which you can think of, from hand-drawn rickshaw to cycle rickshaw to three-wheeler to metro to tram to trains, everything, suburban trains, everything still exists and functional in Calcutta. So we studied their own electrification of public transportation in Calcutta, a report which was published in 2017, and we for the first time talked about charging systems, standards, everything, which was 5 years ago. Not many people knew these things. And what we did, particularly the bus, about 925 bus routes are there in Calcutta, which was in another project of World Bank, it was digitized. All the 925 bus routes were digitized. And we superimposed that map of 925 bus route along with the electric grid, particularly the CSE grid GIS map. Then we had seen which substation or which distribution transformer can power which bus depot or tram depot. And also we found from the traffic analysis that the city core, the most congested routes, we selected 10 of them. The buses don't run, those routes are 16 to 18 kilometer. The bus don't run more than 100 kilometer. Till that time, the buses which were in till 2015-16, only 2-3 companies which introduced electric buses, they came like today's your car which you get, IC engine car. You walk into a showroom and say that Okay, the Maruti showroom, there are 3 models. It's a 1 liter engine, 1.3 liter engine or 1.5 liter engine. I want a 1.4 liter engine, they don't make it. You say, get out of the showroom. So, but electric vehicle, the one which you are introduced at that time, bus, I am talking about the bus, they all came with a 300 plus kilowatt hour of battery. BYD, which had a 23 kilowatt hour battery, and Volvo, which had something like 350 kilowatt hour battery. And battery cost 7 years ago was much higher than what it is today. Even then it was much higher. A bus was 2.5 crore to 3 crore rupees, electric bus which were introduced in in India that time. And all the study reports, feasibility reports said that need viability gap funding of more than 1 crore rupees, then only electric bus will be viable in India. So when we studied, we found that battery cost constitutes 60% of this 3 crore rupees. If that size, what will I do with a 300 kilowatt hour battery which can run 250 to 300 kilometer for a bus in Calcutta city which won't run full day more than 100 kilometer. So we talked about reducing that. We did a cost benefit analysis of 100 kilowatt hour battery, 200 kilowatt hour battery, 300 kilowatt hour battery. Both for 100 and 200 kilowatt hour battery, we found that no viability gap funding is required. JNNREM, same fare, we can run electric buses which are air conditioned buses. So with several rounds of arguments and discussions, debate, WBTC accepted our report, and they asked us to write the specification for the buses. So we recommended 10 routes, which is the most congested route. There were 117 buses which were running at that point in time. That should be made in phase 1 as a pilot phase, 100% electric buses. So they approved for 100 buses. They asked us to write the specification. We finally agreed for 120 kilowatt hour battery for 9 meter bus and 180 kilowatt hour battery for 12 meter bus. So they were about to issue, that's when the FAME 1 came, they got the grant. So that's how they got, Bangalore surrendered, so 80 buses they got the grant. And believe it or not, for the first time in a tender, 9 meter buses they got for 88 lakhs rupees, electric buses, which are still running, Tata Motors. And the 12 meter buses were somewhere around 1 crore 12 lakhs or 1 crore 15 lakhs. So the entire bus design, thereafter every bus company which issued tender, they went with their own battery size, and it can be done, has been done. That was a real turning point in the revolutionizing the bus, at least. There are so many buses has come. Now Calcutta under FAME 2, they have got, or the FAME 2 money now is going under this National Electric Bus Program. They got 1180 buses, which is the tender won by JBM. That's again a local company, Delhi-based company. They are making buses here. Delhi has, more than 2 years, Delhi has some 100 odd buses from JBM, so 1180 buses. So for the first time there again, we'll be talking about this tomorrow. As a electricity distribution company, for me, bus company is not an important client because they take some 30 kilowatt or 100 kilowatt for a bus depot. But all on a sudden they are coming and asking from a distribution company, I want 5 megawatt connection because I have to charge 100 buses in the night. So, and in a city, congested city, distribution companies are not ready to give a 5 megawatt connection. Those who want a 5 megawatt or 10 megawatt connection, that's a big industrial complexes, multi-storied buildings or airport, those are planned 3, 4, 5 years in advance. So the distribution company get the time to make the preparation for that. So this is changing. Under this 50,000 electric buses program, there will be more than 1,000 depots in India which will require this 5 megawatt, 10 megawatt electricity connections. So the electricity connection rules are, every state varies from state to state. In Delhi we give 200 kilowatt from a LT connection, a 3-phase connection we give 200 kilowatt. When you go to Andhra it is 20 kilowatt. Bangalore it was 30, above 30 you have to pay for the cabling and distribution transformer and all that. Last year we got it changed in Bangalore, means Karnataka, to 150 kilowatt. It varies. There are only 10 states which gives more than 100 kilowatt connection. So a public charging station, all of them will end up paying much bigger money. So there are issues. At the same time, as I mentioned already, the ecosystem is ready for taking off, provided conducive policies framework is there. Now we have come to a level, we have been saying that we have to now make things mandatory. So there has to be some routes which has to be only electric, like Connaught Place, only electric vehicle can come to Connaught Place. Or you take some city, EV only zone, which is one we have done in that Dholera or somewhere, the Gujarat, one small city. But every state capitals should have some area. Similarly, all big cities, we should say that from 2024 onwards, all new taxis will be electric, all new three-wheelers will be electric. That kind of mandatory policies need to come. And then after a couple of years, we can say that we'll phase out the old one, by 2028 or 2030, something like that. So the time has come to have such mandatory policies for, but otherwise the ecosystem is ready. I am told that there are more than 3 dozen people make electric two-wheelers. Some of them are very big, some of them are small, but if you say that all, and the cost is so less. And another very important thing which we have done in the Calcutta report is, 2 minutes I'm coming, is about, we understand that two-wheeler and three-wheeler are the ideal candidates where battery swapping can be done. In a car, in a bus, it's difficult. Batteries are big, swapping doesn't work. So, but two-wheeler and three-wheeler, if you make battery swapping, and one, people will not go and connect for charging in their house and battery catch fire. Those kind of things are completely gone. The entry cost to electric mobility is come down by 50%. A two-wheeler or a three-wheeler without a battery will be half the cost. And battery leasing agencies will, the new business model which will come up in cities, though they will charge the batteries in industrial grade charging station and they rent. Today, three-wheeler fellow, what he does, he goes to the fuel station and buy 500 rupee fuel and run the whole day. Same way, he'll be able to lease or rent a charged battery for 200 or 300 or 150 rupees a day and run it. So that is the way of doing it. You know about, there was a battery swapping policy which draft policy Niti Aayog issued. DST had a technical committee which prepared some battery swapping standards, and it got stalled recently. We hope to revive that. So that's another thing which will need standardization in the battery sizes at least, which will help in scaling up of battery swapping and two-wheeler and three-wheeler, etc. So with this, as many of you know, Bureau of Energy Efficiency is the nodal agency for the electric mobility program, the Go Electric. And we are honored to have Mr. Abhay Bakre, the Director General of BE here to chair the session. Sir, warm welcome to you. And we also have Mr. Jayant Kumar from L&T PTD. We have Professor Suresh Jain from IIT Delhi. And we have Vivek Sen from Climate Policy Institute. And also Lawrence Smith may be joining online. So with this, I hand over the session to Girish Gadikar to moderate. Girish is from General Motors, otherwise he's been working with ISGF for long, from his LBNL days. Very warm welcome to all of you, and I have the honor of inviting you to the podium. Please, sir.
So our esteemed panel of speakers will share their expertise on a wide range of topics that come under vision for net zero transport sector in India. So I would like to welcome Mr. Abhay Bakre, DG Bureau of Energy Efficiency, as the chair of the session. And I would also like to welcome Mr. Girish Ghatikar, Energy Leader from GM, who will be moderating the session. We also have with us Mr. Suresh Jain, Professor, IIT Tripati and IIT Delhi, Mr. Vivek Sen, Associate Director, Climate Policy Initiative, Mr. Jayant Kumar, Global Vice President, L&T PT&D Digital Solution, Mr. Anand Singh, Assistant General Manager, ISGF. I welcome you all to the session, sir. Now I would like to hand over to Mr. Girish Ghatikar to moderate the session.
Thank you. Thank you for that background, and apologies for starting a little late. The idea behind this session is basically looking at the role of transportation sector in the net zero area, right? The whole area of electric mobility has caught up quite significantly. I myself was involved in 2 sessions one yesterday and one day before. And it's very important for India. As Reggie mentioned, I've been involved with ISGF for quite some time. I now represent General Motors, which you may have heard, GM company, the largest automaker in the United States and second largest in the, globally. And one of the big aspects of the OEM's push is driven by the policies, and it's not any different in India. So if you look at United States, right, California has been a leader in what we call zero emission vehicles or electric transportation. California had aggressive goals with electric transportation for quite some time, and in recently, the whole electrification drive has taken quite a bit of momentum, particularly with transportation sector. If you look at the whole emissions, right, the transportation sector until last 3 years ago or 4 years ago was the second, carbon emission sector. All of a sudden, because of the extensive driving and vehicle miles travel and improvement in the renewable generations on the generation sector side, it overtook the generation and became the largest carbon emissions in the United States. So if you really want to address the carbon problem or greenhouse gas emission problem, you can't solve it without looking at transportation sector, no doubt. And the situation is also true in India, except that the adoption of electric vehicles per capita is significantly lower when you compare to the other countries like United States or Europe. So growing sustainably right from the beginning becomes a kind of an imperative for a country like India. So talking about California, right? California also has set two important goals. One is all sales coming from 2035 should be zero emission vehicles, okay? They don't specify it has to be battery electric vehicles or it has to be fuel cell vehicles, it has to be zero emission vehicles. That's number one. The second one is 2045. California has set a very aggressive target of reaching all generation or reaching the net zero carbon neutral generation sector by 2045. So you're not only decarbonizing generation sector, but you're also kind of decarbonizing the entire transportation sector. And those intermixes are very critical. A lot of people say, hey, I have a electric transportation, but my generation electricity comes from coal. How can that be clean, right? I totally understand those arguments, right? Even with that, there is a huge air quality issues in states like, or cities like Delhi or cities like Mumbai, where air quality is pretty bad. And those emissions that come from, intercombustion engine are even more harmful than carbon emissions. So there is significant benefit even under those, but they need to go hand in hand. That's very critical. And if you look at in terms of some of the work that the OEMs are doing, OEMs are responding to those policies. And I'm just saying it from the lessons that we have learned at a very high level in the United States, and hopefully they will help in India and some of the expertise that people bring in here. So talking about expertise, we do have an amazing set of panelists here attending and representing global views of the work that they do. They represent not only from many different countries, many different sectors, academia, vendors, the regulators, etc. And we certainly look forward to a very engaging session with them. And hopefully kind of provide some value to all of you who have spent time to attend this session. So talking about the focus of the session, we will look into what are specific lessons that these panelists have learned, these experts have learned that are relevant to India. Okay? So I remember 6-7 years ago when I conducted the first EV workshop at ISGF as part of only around 8-10 people attended. There are not many people. Right? But the electric mobility has kicked up significantly. At that time, there was a mission, National Electric Mobility Mission. I don't even know how many of you even know NEMM, to have around 6 to 7 million electric vehicles on the roads by 2022. And we are in 23 now already, and we are not even close. But although the policy was very aggressive, it all led to the momentum to where we are right now. So it has had its own benefits to some extent, but we should not just lose this momentum, and we should continue this momentum. And I was very, very happy when I was driving through in Bangalore to see a lot of electric cars driven by people which have never seen with green plates, thanks to ISGF for recommending those. So I told my uncle and aunt, if you look at the car, if you look at a green plate, you know that's an electric car. They said, oh, I did not know that. I had seen so many green plates. I did not know they were electric cars. And I said, that's how you know it's an electric car, right? So it creates that, education. It creates that sense of belonging. Now I can, some of these big changes. And also, Reggie talked about making EV-only zones, EV-only driving. I think that incentive is also equally important in US with the federal credit, right? Especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, billions and billions of dollars, and with the NEVI program, what stands for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, billions of dollars being spent to give incentives or credits for people who buy electric cars, up to $7,500 federal credit. That almost brings the cost of the electric car lower than equivalent of the internal combustion engine car, because you sometimes also get state credits on top of it. The second aspect of that is also charging infrastructure, because electric vehicle and charging infrastructure go hand in hand. A lot of people ask me what comes first, whether the electric car comes first so that people start deploying charging infrastructure, or you install charging infrastructure first so that people have motivation to buy electric cars. But always say there is a set of, strategic push that has to happen from the government before the private sector starts taking it, and that's where charging infrastructure plays a very critical role, and US has taken that route. Europe is taking that route as well, so there are some good lessons on how to make charging infrastructure available first to encourage people to shift or buy electric cars. I think that's one of the very important lessons. The second also is looking from interoperability, right? So I conducted a session day before yesterday in close partnership with the Open Charge Alliance, OCA, which is responsible for a standard called OCPP that allows charging stations to be managed by a charge point operator. And it also allows EVs to roam from one operator to another operator called OCPI, Open Charge Point Interface. Adopting such kind of standards are very critical in ensuring that you have strategic long-term view of installation of chargers and open innovation to small startups. And always get heartened by seeing so many small startups coming in India that are developing apps, that are developing new ways to really charge cars, etc. So, India is becoming kind of a basket of innovation as we start thinking about this electric mobility. And so we should all embrace this as a new wave of new opportunities for a lot of young, Indian talent coming and starting up new startups. So that's basically, I think, one of the key drivers. Net zero are great, but what does it add value to people and people's lives? And I think there is tremendous value that it can add to people's lives and improve people's lives. Not to mention, electric cars are amazingly great to drive. They're quiet, they have great torque and great driving experience. Forget about all of this. Why do people buy better phones? Because they have a better experience. Electric cars are not any different. You have a better driving experience. If you do have a better driving experience, why would you go settle for something less, right? So that's how I look at it as well. With that introduction, for this particular session, we will focus on technology, we'll focus on policy and regulatory aspect from many different panelists. I would like to call upon the chair. Alka, is she here? I was told that she was here. Okay. So there's been a slight change. Mr. Abhay Bakre is going to chair this, and he's the DG of Bureau of Energy Efficiency. If you don't mind coming and giving your speak, you can either speak from there or however you like, sir. Appreciate that. And Bureau of Energy Efficiency is a very important agency, by the way, just as an introduction to Mr. Abhay Bakre. I had been involved with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency during Ajay Mathur days. If people who remember Ajay Mathur, Bureau of Energy Efficiency has been responsible for creating a star labeling program for energy efficiency, appliance standards, if you remember, the energy conservation building code, which are very critical in terms of improving building energy efficiency. And I'm very glad that they have taken this leadership role in driving the electric mobility in a sustainable way. And I'm very heartened to see Mr. Abhay Bakre being here. So over to you, sir.
Let me first compliment ISGF and all other partners for setting up this discussion on smart energy and smart mobility. You can come down here.
That's fine. I'll stand there. Yeah.
So, see, why are we talking about net zero transport sector? And Girish had in fact given a lot of solutions, given a lot of recommendations in that. But if we see the entire world, when we talk about the climate change efforts, our overall objective is to reduce emissions from the different economies. In a developing country like India, the emissions are actually growing in absolute terms. So that's the, if we pick up the first point, and I'll try to highlight mostly on the what India should do and as compared to other developed countries. So the developed countries, under the Kyoto Protocol, they were supposed to peak somewhere in 2000 or 2005. And they were given targets to reduce their emission by 2020. To different targets to different countries. That time, the developing countries, what we call it as non-Annex, Annex 1 countries, were not given any targets. So the mechanism started with the CDM, most of you are aware, although not much relevance here, but there is some kind of a discussion point here how to actually also use the carbon credits. But then the Paris Agreement came. Now let's understand very clearly how the global scenario is changing. Then the Paris Agreement came. So in Paris Agreement, it was not kind of a country-wise targets, but it was more of a individual commitment. So we call it as a nationally determined commitments or contributions. So the idea is that every country will define their own contribution, making it for the entire globe, because the climate change is a global phenomena. There are many countries, they say, oh, the climate change is not affecting us. But they say, okay, if it doesn't affect today, it may be after tomorrow, your country will also get affected. So something like that. Someone says, yeah, okay, I'm not having that much emissions. Some countries are having good natural resources, hydro, wind, etc. So they say, oh, why should we reduce our emission? I said, that's fine. But as long as the climate is changing across the world, each one on this earth will get affected. Now coming back to the Paris Agreement. So the different countries placed different contribution. The developing economies like India or China, we endorse that we will reduce our emission intensity and not the absolute emissions. So now there is a clear difference, even in the Paris Agreement or the NDCs, what we call it, from 21 to 25 and then 26 to 2030. And of course, now it will keep on going beyond. The countries are given options, either you put your 10 years targets or you put 5-year targets and modify after 5 years. So that's option given to every country. So India chose by 2030 we will reduce our emission intensity by 33% as per the Paris NDCs and against the 2005 level. Whereas the developed countries were given targets that as per their 1990 level, they were supposed to reduce their absolute emissions. So when we took assessment in 2021 and the emissions were recorded somewhere up to 2016-17, we could realize that overall our emissions have increased by only about 90%, 90, from 2005 level. Industry emissions only contributed around, that is the addition was 84%. But the transport sector emissions in absolute terms increased by 180%. Now this is the discussion point today, that when the entire economy, that absolute emissions have only increased by 90%. The transport sector emissions have increased by 180%. Why is it happening? So there are two reasons. One, there is a phenomenal growth in the transport sector. Yes. But the second thing is, the rest of the sectors have started implementing interventions or programs which are reducing emissions, but the transport sector has not become enough, serious enough to reduce the emission. The policies have started, but the impact is still not there as per the, let's see what the new report comes, that will be, I think, emissions up to 2020, because that will be the starting point for our Paris Agreement. So this was an alarming situation. Now, good roads, good vehicles, and of course, much more flexibility, growth in the economy, especially in the service sector. So it all led to a kind of a situation where the demand for transport was growing up. But did we put our policy in a right place to also consider how can we at least optimize the emissions? Unfortunately, as per the data available, and it's not, not my opinion, but the data shows that the efforts on transport sector were not up to the mark as long as at least up to 2016-17 data is available. But yes, there have been recent efforts, recent means last 2-3 years I can say. Some of the efforts already mentioned by Girish. But let's see then what can be done now. What are the options available? As you highlighted about Dr. Mathur and the different policies with bureaus, and yesterday we completed 21 years of bureau, because the bureau was set up on 1st of March 2002. So we realized a few key philosophies. First thing, the sector which grows very with a higher rate has higher opportunity. And that's why if you attack those sectors which are growing at a much faster rate, you have higher efficiency improvement because you have more opportunities in that. That's the first key thing. Second thing, it is not always possible to put mandatory regime and to expect immediate response from the consumer, because at the end it is the demand sector, it's not a supply sector. Yeah, and transport is also kind of a demand sector, it's not a supply sector. So if you start putting some kind of incentives and then slowly put or get into some kind of a mandatory regime, to not the full extent, only the partial extent, then the results are much better and much closer to what we want. So now this can now apply for the transport sector. I'll try to come to the solutions now. So what do we really want? We want that the transport sector is growing, and we want to optimize the transport sector in such a manner that the emissions from the transport sector should not grow the way it is growing now, and it should actually get reduced. So that's the first or the problem statement, if we say. What are the options available? The transport sector, as I mentioned, should be categorized as a service sector, because it's not like a power sector where if you want the power to come from either wind or from solar, you can invest there, you can get it. If you want to double the investment, you will get the double solar capacity. But this cannot happen absolutely in the transport sector, because the transport sector depends on the demand, and that demand is not coming from the transport sector alone. This demand is created somewhere else. So first thing, you need to understand what is the demand coming, and then you need to attune your solutions to that kind of demand, making sure that your solutions are greener solutions. So first example, if I say, I'll come back to electric. So the modal shift. When 2015 we prepared the NDC documents for Paris Agreement or for the India, that time the railways freight share somewhere in 2013-14 was assessed on 39% of freight share. It was already coming down to 36%. We thought, can we make it back from 36 to 39 or 40 by 2020, make it somewhere around 42, 43 by 2025, and make it 45% by 2030. And that's written, if you can see our original NDC document. What does it really mean? If you want to shift some 1,000 tons of kilometers from road transport to rail transport, the reduction is emission is 1:9 or 9:1, you can say. So on a road transport, if you are emitting emissions of 90 ton, you are going to have only 10 or 15 ton for the same kind of a transport service on the rail mode. So that was a very clear thing. If you just go from 36 to 45% by 2030, you are going to save at least 120 to 150 million tons of CO2 straight away per year from road to, this is a shift. I'm not talking about the efficiency part. Efficiency is completely different. It is just a change of the way we shift from coal to solar. There is a obvious saving in the emissions. So this is the first solution. But unfortunately, what has happened? It has come down from 36 to 27 now. Is it not alarming? Now, why it is happening? I don't blame the good roads, I don't blame the good fleet service, but the issue is that perhaps we have not reformed our transport ecosystem, which is more suitable for rail transport. We can imagine if there is a solution available, as we talk about for any household. Suppose if I can put a solar rooftop and get a, then I am supposed to do the investment, okay, whatever is the cost of that solar, but at least in next 20 years I will get the free energy from sun. So that kind of solution available, complete rail systems available. Rail transport was carrying 72% of freight in 50s and 60s. It has come down to 27%. Not that they have not grown up, perhaps the growth in railways was only 4 to 5%. The growth in transport sector was around 8% or 9%, and growth in road transport has been 10%. So that's the simple equation here. Coming back to solution, then the second option is the road transport itself can be decarbonized. Of course, the two options, one is the e-mobility, other thing is about the biofuels or whatever, any other kind of zero emission vehicle. So in that regard, it will take some time. E-mobility has an issue of power availability, charging availability. Power is not a major issue, I can say. Even if whatever targets we are talking by 2030, as you mentioned, or Mr. Rejipalli also mentioned, we are expecting only about 7,000 to 10,000 megawatt additional power requirement. So that in any case, as you know, by 2030 our 500 gigawatt target, so 10 to 15 gigawatts is hardly anything that will be available. But the more solutions will be towards from the consumer side. How consumers are motivated. So in this regard, there are certain policies we are putting. How can we, if the consumers are charging in the daytime, where they can charge it from solar. So we are trying to push most of the charging stations directly getting power from solar, that's through open access or whatever. And there the consumer will be getting the tariff at least 2 to 3 rupees less. So at least 20 to 25% less tariff. That will be a much, so it will encourage everybody to go for that. Second thing is home charging. We are trying to make home and office charging as cheapest as possible. So most of the charging can happen there. So these kind of things are there. But yes, as you already mentioned about the battery availability, the cost of battery, the initial cost. One thing which is actually missing is a complete financing arrangement. If certain financial institutions come, and I'll stop here with that, complete financial solutions are available from big FIs who can actually put some kind of a capital in purchasing batteries, then either putting it to the 4-wheeler, 3-wheeler, 2-wheeler battery policies. In fact, battery swapping policies should drive that. In that case, this initial capital barrier, which is actually preventing the e-mobility adoption, can be removed. So the charging barrier is already on the cards. It can be easily resolved in coming 2 to 3 years. But the battery cost barrier is one area where there. And the last thing I can recommend is that we should really go for biofuels. We are late, but now we are doing really good. The biofuel actually movement started, I was in PCRA also in 2012. That time there was a huge movement from 2010 to 2012 to promote biofuels. But somehow we put it again on the back burner. Now we have come out and EBP or ethylene blending and all these things, flexi fuel. Now it is coming up. So that will also help transform our transport sector. Thank you so much for patient listening, and I look forward for discussions from our other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Abhay, for that excellent overview of the BEE's perspective. A couple of very important points I'd like to touch for a minute or so. The first thing you mentioned about the support from the automotive OEMs, right? I think that's very critical. If you look at the example in the United States, the state have very aggressive policies. I mentioned California EV-only sales by 2035. And the federal government also recently, the Biden administration, worked with the automotive OEMs, worked with the regulators, et cetera, to say, even in the country, it's a very ambitious plan. We'll see what comes out of it. 50% of the sales by 2030 in the country should be electric vehicles, right? It's a very aggressive. And I'm very fortunate, as I said, I represent GM. The automotive OEMs are responding to it. GM just released circular saying that it'll make only electric cars starting 2035, right? Responding to that change. So if there is enough incentives and policy push to get to those targets, I think the automotive OEMs will respond, but consumer education also becomes very critical. An example of it is what we released in EV Live program as a consumer's education, telling them the benefits of electric vehicles, how much money they save, because a lot of people miss that, hey, I'm paying maybe 10%, 20% more for the electric car, but they don't realize over the lifetime of the car, 5 years or 10 years they use, the total cost of ownership is significantly less on an electric car than an internal combustion engine car. So those kind of education in understanding the air quality issues, the emission issues, the economics, which a lot of people take a look, and India is one of the very cost-conscious market out here. I think that lesson is very critical. In fact, we did a study with ISGF here for electrification of Kolkata. I think that report is available at the exhibit. Mr. Sain here was involved in that study as well, where we looked at the total cost of ownership and said, this makes total sense to electrify public transportation as well, not just passenger cars or private transportation sector. So I think looking from those angles are all very critical. So we really appreciate your insights in that. So we do have 3 more speakers. However, Mr. Laurent Schmidt is not going to be joining. He was planning to join virtually. Jayant will cover some of his topic himself, so he'll cover his as well as Laurent's topic also. In the meantime, I'd like to call Mr. Suresh Jain, who is the professor from IIT Tirupati and IIT Delhi, to give his prepared remarks. One request, if you can keep your prepared remarks to up to 5 minutes, it'll give us an opportunity to have a little bit more interactive discussion with the audience if they have any questions. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Girishji, and I thank you, India Smart Grid Forum, for inviting me. And also thank you to Abhayji, because he set the platform why we are discussing this topic. And that's where climate change comes in picture. And more close to it's a health, right? Ultimately it is affecting us. That is the most important reason. So when you say we are talking about the net zero, so we are talking about climate, we are talking about environment, we are talking about ultimately the human or any of the living beings. Especially we are very greedy, so definitely we want to protect ourselves. If we see that we want to reduce the implications, or you can say the impacts from the transport sector, so I just connect few of the threats, because I'm from an academic background, so my orientation may be a little different what the industry think, but Abhayji have made some of the things easy for me to connect those dots. When we are talking about to reduce the impacts of transport, and when we talk about the environment, climate, or human health, so 3 important aspects come in pictures. Like what he mentioned very clearly, that one is the increase in the energy efficiency. And I think lots of things Bureau of Energy Efficiency is already doing. I saw a couple of weeks before, I was also part of the discussion with the CAFE standard when we were talking about CAFE 2, and looking how further we have to reduce the carbon from the vehicles. Second, he also tried to connect again reduce the activity. So one is he was trying to mention why the transport sector is not coming forward in that pace compared to other, you can say, sectors. So we are more thinking as of now is the motorized vehicle. And already there is a challenge when we are talking about the cities and air quality, you know, you're not supposed to only talk Delhi now. All urbanized areas, air quality is not really good in terms of human health. Whatever we say, like 20%, 30% we have reduced, but still almost more than 90% of your cities are not breathable if you are comparing with the Indian standards. If you compare with the other global standards like WHO, then almost all the cities are not qualified to breathe the air quality because that quality is not that great. So if you have to look on that aspect, so our policy have to think from the beginning how to interconnect. Like when you're talking about the motorized, why the electrification is more dominating in the city? Because we are saying that you are reducing the emissions. Yes, that is true, because from the tailpipe your emissions are not coming out. It's not only the greenhouse gas emissions, at the same time other toxic chemicals are also going away. But can you see the trade-off if looking into the current scenario? Like from where the energy is coming. If it is coming from the power, means in terms of fossil fuel based energy system, then concern is still there. Because when you are burning the petroleum products directly in combustion engine, your efficiency is on a higher side. When you are generating the electricity in thermal power plants, and you know how much is the efficiency of our thermal power plants are, and then you are bringing that and then you run the vehicle, that's the concern. So it means there is a trade-off is there. When we talk about these three components, and like Abhijit already mentioned that if you are going to charge in the daytime and night time, there is a clear things. The emissions, if you do charge in the night time because of the demand and then how you are going to meet the demand, your emissions, net emissions on the life cycle stage is going to be on a higher side. So it means it is not only the infrastructure, it means you have to think lots of other dots, how to connect before in hand so that you can plan your other resources well. Otherwise, what is going to happen? Maybe things are coming, but you will not able to manage. And it is something like Ukraine war have already given us some lessons. It's not for the Europe only, for other things also, the energy security always comes in picture. And when we are talking about even the biofuel also, again the food security comes in picture. So we cannot only take the resources for a particular purpose without looking at how the trade-off, how the implications are going to be there. If I see that in Indian context, we have more than like maybe 300 million vehicles. And the pace we are going to work, I think somewhere we have to set the goal, like for example, whenever we are working towards the air quality, we always say the government have to come forward and to make a model in such a way that people really feel, yes, there is examples. Like for example, he already mentioned that freight is one area where we have not really looked on. Even the efficiency in general, without going electrification, still there is a huge scope to improve the efficiency. And there you can reduce the net emissions, not only in terms of GHG emissions, even in the terms of air quality improvement as well. But if you move towards electrification, then definitely the win-win situation is there if your electricity is coming from the renewable sources. So that's one area where we have to really think about this. And at the same time, we have to also create certain role models, like we have to see how our municipal corporation or municipal vehicles to be electrified quickly. However, you can say buses or the public transport have to be quickly converted to electricity, right? But at the same time, if you see the multimodal transport systems, whenever it's coming, so the purpose, I remember I was also part of this multimodal transport system when we started from Delhi. So we thought like there are people who are moving from the private vehicle users. But we saw that there is a lots of shift from the bus transport to metro system. So this is also a concern, like which particular person you want to move, and how to make a balance. It means somewhere your bus system is not that efficient to give in a, you can say, lucrative option that for the users. Because the reason is simple. You don't know what time bus will come. If it comes, what time it will reach, looking into the heterogeneity of the traffic in our system. So it means when we are talking about the electrification, I think there are multiple aspects are there where we have to give it a thought. And I saw like already we are struggling with the non-motorized option, like active travel, or maybe you can say the bicycle. If you see the European system now, before they were doing, but after this new crisis which happens, they learn that energy security is very important. And then they are also shifting towards the active, you can say, travel, or you can say the bicycle and so. So it means it is very important if we talk about the transport system. So one is, yes, definitely electrification is very important. Important in that connection is from where the energy is coming, right? And second is the other, you can say, clean fuel options, like hydrogen is one, and biofuel is one. Then if you change somewhere, like all these are dependent on the technology, right? Somewhere if we can shift some portion to the behavioral change also, and that can also really will help us to reduce our overall intensity, or you can say net emissions, either in terms of air pollutants or the GHG emissions. So these are the important points. And one point I just want to highlight, like Mr. Pillai was in the morning, in the welcome remarks mentioning about the Kolkata example. And then he was start saying that the bus system was having this much of battery size or that much of battery size, and then you just again rework on the specification. So how many cities will do this exercise? It means if you want the public transport or any, you can say any transport system have to come, such specifications can be discussed on a larger audience, with a larger audience or experts, and then see what suits to many cities, right, or other places, right? And then we come up with the centralized, or you can say, solutions, and then it can be implemented fast. Otherwise, every time if you can go and then again design for the specific things, I think it's going to be a very cumbersome exercise. So these are my initial remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. Those are some excellent points, Suresh. You know, I always love the academic perspective, right? I come from that. I was in Berkeley Lab for 14 years and an EPRI and everything. It's a very important gap in terms of a more qualitative and quantitative assessment of the needs. Some things that you just mentioned in terms of looking at the role of energy security, right? India spent $95 billion every year on oil imports, right? And the war has taught us that's all not a great idea. And also India has discovered one of the largest deposits of lithium recently, if I remember correctly, reading the news. So all of these bodes well for India in terms of improving energy security. So electric mobility represents that opportunity as well. We are running a little behind the schedule, but we can still meet the schedule if we keep 5 minutes per panelist. Continue that tradition. The next speaker I would like to call upon is Jayant, if you don't mind. You have to. Jayant will also be. Jayant will speak and represent the the L&T, Larsen & Toubro, India. He's a vice president there, and he will also talk in lieu of Laurent Schmidt, who is the head of utility and European developments at Decibel, one of the bidirectional charge manufacturing vendor. And over to you, Jayant. You can come here, you can speak from there, whichever works for you. Yeah.
Good morning. How are you all doing? All right. So Girish has given me a stringent directive that I gotta be doing these two in 10 minutes or less. Or let's see. I got his word from his mouth. And we are from L&T. L&T always completes the project on time. So I cannot defy that. All right. So as you heard from Girish, Mr. Laurent Schmidt, who is the Vice President of utilities and European sector for decibel. So that's his first presentation I'm going to give you. But before I go to any of the presentation, what I'll tell that has been an excellent session. Congratulations to ISGF and Girish for conducting the session. And I really have to say that it was a very educational opening from you, Vijay. That was very, very helpful because people typically look at things in the detail and they miss the macroscopic view where the starting point should be. So absolutely. So having said that, continuing the thread and the momentum that we have created in the session, I bring a little different perspective. I bring the technology perspective. I bring the technology solution perspective. We all know that there have been a lot of improvements and we are very confident that we'll get there. But then I would like to bring to your attention certain specific segments because as you talk about transport sector, it's a service sector and it ranges from residential to light commercial to medium duty to a heavy duty vehicle if you starting from segmentizing from that perspective. In the United States, we have the class of the vehicle defined from the class duty vehicle number 1 to the medium and high duty going all the way to the class 8. The reason why I wanted to take that approach because what I am going to cover is that depending on what class vehicle you're talking about and what segment you're talking about, the problem is different. And so in my presentation and discussion, I'll be focusing on the class 1, class 2, class 3, which is basically residential, but then there, and that's Lawrence Smith's presentation, and he's focused on what should be the home EV infrastructure and what should be actually a home energy infrastructure. So that's what his focus is. So with that, I got 2 minutes to go through his 8 slides, and I'll do that. So as you can see, energy on your terms, that's what he would like to achieve. He used to be CEO of European Network Transmission Service Operator, ENSO-E. So you can understand that when he's looking at that, he's looking at how the end consumer gets engaged. And that's what that one is. Now, there is a lot of data, and I'm sure that ISGF will be distributing this presentation, so I'm not going to go into the detail. What you're really seeing is that, okay, if you really look at European push, it's quite a bit. And what they're really talking about is that they really want to have home-powered EV charging infrastructure. And if that happens, you can imagine that what level of electrification comes into the transport sector. And it has been going on. And having said that, what he's really after is, and these are the typical drivers that we all talk about in all conferences, so I'm not going to repeat and rehash just to maintain my time. Basically, it's all about that how do we be resilient to ourselves, to community, to the nation, wherever you are, and then how does it solve the climate change problem, right? Now, the key thing that what he's offering in decibel is, and we are in the partnership with them, so L&T is in partnership with decibel, it's a concept of home energy station. And the idea is that people like you and I, we are not going to be going and scratching our head that, oh, how do I go and manage my energy here and there and so on and so forth. So decibel has launched a power electronics equipped system optimization enabled complete data integrated in terms of what's the tariff, what's the opportunity, and now in this particular case, the initial launch in California, the place where I live, and the idea is to focus on high-end community energy, high-end community campus where people are having anyway electric vehicle intensity going on fairly well, but then the question is how to even push it to the next level, right? And that's what this one is. So you can see The idea is that in order to push to the net zero direction, if you are going to create, and back to what you're saying, that how to create some role models. So this should be a role model for medium to high income group, that how do they adapt to a system which is painless, just like this thing, as Girish was talking about. So basically the DC Bell home energy station is like this. The homeowner doesn't need to worry about the entire charging infrastructure and so on and so forth. You just plug that into your home, and of course the expectation is that you have the solar installed, or if not, then there is a, the tariff integrated to the utility, that how you are going to be operating, and overall energy bill will be less. And needless to say that overall life cycle cost of your transportation is much, much less. So that's what they are trying to solve. So with that, if you can go to the next slide, next set of presentation, which is mine. The message that I want to convey to you is that, again, bumping up from the residential to light commercial or the community style and commercial and industrial style situation, where what we really need to be looking at, that what type of technology solution and what type of initiative that we need to be looking into. Now, in this particular case, focusing on what are the right business models and what are the green electricity driving EV charging infrastructure. That's the key. Otherwise, you are not going to be meeting the net zero target that you're really talking about. So to keep it fast on this one, I'll just browse through a quick slide. Girish has already talked about what's happening in the United States and California, so I wanted to give you the view of that, but I'm not going to rehash that. The key thing is 2035, 0% emission vehicle. You look at the top county, which is Santa Clara in the state of California, is still 34%. It's a long way from getting there. So there are lessons to be learned that we should be taking as an experience, only because we in India have to figure it out our own, what we need to be doing. It's not something that you do a copy and paste. But the point is that you look at the adoption rate, and I would like to probably share one experience and example. There are many. You talk about, Reggie was talking about the Class 8. He was talking about the buses and trucks and so on. So in ports, you have many number of trucks, right? For example, Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach, there are twin ports in the Los Angeles area. You're talking about 20,000 trucks operation every day. So there has been a big push that how they are going to be complete electrified and so on. And so I was in one of the committee meeting where one of the fleet owner of the electric company, the truck company was talking about, oh, you know what, the CARB is California Accounting Reduction Board, who have all their own fundings as well. They were trying to give me here $400,000, go and experiment it. I said, no, you keep the check back. And you know why? I don't know what to do with the electric truck because I have no idea that how am I going to charge it up and how I'm going to be operating it. What I'm trying to get at is that the guy was saying that it took 10 years in that community to move from diesel to natural gas. Now we have a little bit more than 10 years, and we have to move from natural gas to electric truck. That's a much bigger lift. So I just wanted to kind of paint that picture. So Abhijit, you did mention that we have only need of 8,000 megawatt. You're right in the aggregate, but the problem is a bit more spatial. The question is where, how, and when. And so it's not that straightforward, and we really need to be careful about looking into that. So that's what I really wanted to mention mainly. And I'm going to skip these slides in the interest of time, and I'll just say that the real key thing is the grid and customer side interaction is the key. Because we are going to be stuck if the adaptability is not there, either due to the lack of business model or lack of the incentives, or sometimes the barrier in the technology efficiency, which we do not underline. I did not mention about it that one of the key things that in DC bill is that the efficiency of the power conversion is 97%. I'll just leave it at that. Whereas when you look at the power conversion efficiencies that we are talking about, it's a good research topic that you should look at. On an average, it's not more than 60-70%. So there are a lot of energy getting wasted. People are not even watching that out as well. So that's the part that we are focusing on. And then with that, I would like to just suggest that there is a video, and it can just play by itself. So we in L&T, in our home campus, which is the headquarters of Power Transmission and Distribution in Chennai, we have gone ahead and we have created a campus EV charging station. We are encouraging all the employees to adapt to that. It's free to begin with. I would say there has to be some policy and the directive towards that, where we should be pushing the corporates to have the corporate campus, especially when they are the working campus, because people are going to be, if they are going to be charging at home on the campus, they're good. They don't need anything else. So that's what I meant by the C&I sector, and in this particular case, I'm talking about, again, the vehicle class number 1 to class 4. But then the similar concept that can be applied to the medium duty as well, which is the commercial light vehicle as well, which is the fleet operators of the likes of FedEx and the DHLs and so on, which was part of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayant, as a background. Just a little bit of, you mentioned a very important point there, the locational impacts, right, of EV charging. It's not so much about how much total demand EVs add, it's about where they add it. In my work in Auto DR for lab for a long time, we mentioned one thing in demand response. It's not so much about total energy use, it's about where and when you use it. That matters a lot. And we are seeing those locational impacts, specifically with the level 2 chargers in the United States. If you install a level 2 charger, which is around 6.6 to 7.2 kilowatts of charging in your garage, you are literally tripling or quadrupling the total home demand with just one level 2 chargers. You could imagine the impact it might cause for grid infrastructure that's not ready for that, the transformers, the substations, the feeders, right? So how do we consider that and look at from a grid perspective is extremely critical. So I really appreciate those insights. Thank you, Jayant. So we have our last speaker for the day, save the last, best for the last, Mr. Anand Singh from India Smart Grid Forum. He is the Assistant General Manager there. Over to you, Anand.
Thank you, Girish. Being the last speaker, I have an unnecessary burden for being quick and being effective also. And especially once you have a panel where you have an industry leader from L&T and you have a veteran like Abhay Bakre sir, and you have a professor also from IIT Delhi. So I'll be very quick. Most of the things have been discussed, so my job is really easy. But the different perspective is being net zero means, adopting electric vehicle in the grid, more and more adoption of electric vehicle. So I have a different perspective for an electric vehicle. I'm talking about a car. So once you have a car, IC engine car, or you have a EV car, so on day one, your EV car would have emitted more carbon than your IC engine car has emitted. So on day one, you are more carbon positive as a EV car. And then after that, what we do? We go and charge it from the grid, where 70% time you are charging it from coal energy or anything that is coming from the gray energy. That is just a number. So you are adding more and more carbon positive to this mode of transport. So that is one thing that needs to be thought about differently, that how we can fix this issue from day one. At least you have a burden of being more carbon positive if you own an EV. This can be EV car, this can be EV truck, or it can be EV bus also. So how can we fix it? Maybe we can make sure that whenever we are charging, we can pay some premium, but the sustainability comes with a cost. And there are now technology available what can make sure that how you are charging from green electron. Blockchain technology we have been able to do at ISUW, we have been able to do a couple of pilots with the help of blockchain technology where we have been able to know that what electron is consumed by which person and where this electron is coming from. So that is now, with the help of technology, that is possible now, that yes, the solution is there, but are we inclined towards this, the green energy, and using green energy while taking that responsibility of being an EV owner? Another big challenge, what looks big in this ecosystem, is recycling of batteries. That is, I mean,
To relieve sir by 11:30, sir.
so I'll take 2-3 minutes and then we can, yes. So EV batteries are going to, today it looks very simple, but how about, 10 years down the line and 15 years down the line, how we are going to, this is another issue that is coming in, what we are not looking at right now. And green energy transportation can be another solution.
Thank you.
Green energy for transportation seems another medicine for it. And necessarily this would come from a very well thought regulation that some of the energy you are consuming in your EV, whether this is car, this is bus, or this is truck, should come from solar or any non-fossil energy source. Another solution that can be thought of is if I am using a conventional vehicle. I'll give an example. If I'm going from Delhi to Patna, it's almost 1,000 kilometers, and I spend almost 10,000 rupees, 10 rupees per kilometer. I'm doing just the economics part per kilometer to reach there. So it is like the cost is 10,000 running your car 1,000 kilometers. If you use EV, the cost is considerably low. This is going to be 2,500 or 2,000 even. But once I become an EV owner, now here is the advantage that I do have a lesser amount to pay, and that is my benefit. But when I go across the highways, at least I end up paying 2,000 at toll. So my fuel charge is 2,000 and the toll charge is also 2,000. So that is another disadvantage or discouragement I feel while being an EV owner. So this is also another policy intervention required. Necessarily green vehicles, let it be car, bus or trucks, should be given some advantage in the beginning in terms of the toll taxes. And that would actually encourage this sector and help the entire ecosystem to become sustainable fast. Another, a couple of studies, the Calcutta studies were addressed twice. That there was 80 buses, we did it in 2016. Now we are doing another study in Calcutta itself. And now we are planning to have 1,200 EV buses that is supposed to come to the depots in next 2 years. So another burden, same thing is being repeated. Again, you are day one, you are being more carbon positive. So what is your responsibility and how this can be fixed? Unfortunately, the transport operators, they do not understand electricity sector. This is very new for them, that how to operate this bus, what is electricity, what is the source of the fuel. Now the fuel is electricity. So the another solution can be, the depots can necessarily be solarized. I mean, it's high time. We have to fix it at the source rather than keep buying it from the green source and then using it. So this is the first medicine that can be given. Necessarily, this depots can be solarized, and we have enough space as all state government depots across country. So that's not the problem. That's the advantage of solarizing it. You have enough space, and this can be done easily. Most of the things we have discussed were, it started from FAME 1, FAME 2, where we have policies for electric buses coming to the market. In FAME 1, we have few thousand of buses, and then in FAME 2, It's like, and all states were given 80, 100, 120, 150, some sorts of numbers were, deputed to all the states, and they started this. Calcutta was one of the first depot that was established in Calcutta. So the entire, the entire carbon emission is done not only by buses. By the most of the trucks that is running on the roads, they are emitting more carbon than buses, and we miss this. That we should understand that how we fix the bigger problem rather than the problem we are solving and we are looking at. It is only 20% of the problem. The 80% of the road transport is through trucks. So how we are going to solve the bigger problem? We have started another study that we are trying to create a freight corridor for trucks, and where we will find out that how this can be made energy positive or not energy positive, at least carbon neutral, and how through charging, how through green electrons this can be done, how efficiently this can be run. And when we go and interact to the ground level, I mean, all good thing about policies, but there is a very different scenario when you go and you speak to the end user. I talking to a truck owner that we have to go carbon neutral. So you have to adopt EV truck. So the truck owner would ask me that, what is the cost of the EV truck? I would say 1 crore. So now he has a big problem, saying that my IC engine is coming with 30, 35 lakhs, 12-ton capacity truck, and you are talking about even 1 crore. So in my lifetime, I am not going to recover my ROI. So that is the biggest problem. From the ground, when you see it from a different angle, and we are talking about transport. So it's very hard for me to make him understand that this will work, and this can work with a very necessary regulatory intervention when at least some subsidy can be given to the truck owners. Buses are getting the subsidies across all those plans, but trucks are like they are left alone, and they are large in numbers. So that is one thing the government should look after. And another better solution, next step could be batteries can be used in a service model, because 50 or 40% of your EV costs is your battery cost. So there is a possibility, if we start thinking in a different line, that whether batteries can be used, the battery that truck or the bus is running, this can be used in a service model. So your cost goes down at day one. It's like 40% cost is taken care of, and 30-40% subsidy can be given, and now you are at par with the cost of the IC engine truck, and in that case it seems working. So these are few things, or my observations standing at the ground. Hope this helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, you made some excellent points in terms of regulatory interventions, no doubt about it. One thing I think you touched upon is the life cycle emissions, right? We just don't need to look from the emissions from one time. It's about life cycle. In US, we did a study that looked at if you really bought an electric car that has higher emission than the internal combustion engine car because of the lithium battery that goes into it, the amount you drive and where you charge makes a lot of difference how quickly you recover that emissions. Typically, it takes around 2 to 3 years, in a state like California, which has an aggressive renewable content in there, and the more you drive, the more you recover the emissions. But over the total cost of ownership, you're net positive from the emission side of things. And I mentioned earlier as well, from the air quality, where the emission goes is equally important. So in a city like Delhi or Mumbai, it makes a lot of difference in terms of health and other quality of life impacts as well. So with that, I promise to take some questions from the audience. We'll take maybe 1 or 2. Himani, and we have a lady. If you could just announce your name and company you represent before you ask your questions, please. Thank you. You can pass the mic there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Mani Vadari. I'm from Seattle, Washington, US. Some of you guys on the panel know me well, so I'm going to keep my questions brief, but this is to the entire panel. I'm struggling with this a little bit, not because I don't believe in EVs. I'm a firm believer of EVs, but I think we are very close to recreating the same problem that we had with the internal combustion engines. For example, we are talking about Class 8 trucks running on batteries. Does anybody really understand how heavy those trucks are? If you put that many batteries to be able to get, say, 500 miles of service that a typical Class 8 truck gives you, that truck will not be able to carry any goods anymore because the truck is already too heavy. And the impact on the roads, the impact on the charging infrastructure and all of that stuff. That's number one, right? The second one is we talked about biofuels. Mr. Abe Bakre talked about biofuels. That is not carbon free. Right? So my problem with all of this is charging infrastructure. It takes a lot of time and effort and money. I live in Redmond, Washington, and within 3 miles from my house, there is a Microsoft depot, a FedEx depot, a UPS depot, and a USPS depot. All of them go from internal combustion engines, which is about a total megawatt load of 5 megawatts. If they all convert to electricity, it's going to go to about 150 to 200 megawatts. Now try bringing 250 megawatts into a downtown area delivery capacity. So you go down this path, I just think that there is a lot of analysis needs to be done. And I think I want to be very, very careful before we, pilots, very easy. Anybody can do a pilot. In fact, a much smarter man than me said, utilities are famous for this particular disease called pilotitis. We love doing pilots. We absolutely adore doing pilots. The problem with all of this is when you go take it from a pilot to scale, that's a much different problem. And this is for the entire panel, including you, Rish.
Thank you, Mani. You set the bar very high. So a lot of, for all the panelists, I'm a moderator. What do I know? So I'll let the panelists take that question. I can't plead my Fifth Amendment here, but I can plead my moderator status here. So appreciate that question. As usual, I think, Anand, you touched upon the emissions. So maybe you want to start, yeah.
Absolutely right, Mani. That was the teething problem when we started the freight corridor. So it seems that we are running a truck to transport the batteries only. If you are talking about the amount of load that comes on the truck. So what is the wisest thing what can be thought of? Reducing the size of batteries. And in the beginning, this may work. So rather than having 324 kWh battery, we thought of having only 100 kWh battery or 128 kWh battery. But that would give you another challenge of having very intermittent charging. So now Government of India plans for charging across highways. So that it is there and it is coming. It is coming, it's in plan. So that is going to solve your problem. Another battery efficiency in terms of the weight and the charging capacity also, charging density also. So as we go ahead, move ahead, that I think that is being solved. I look forward this getting solved in the future. But to start with, we have dealt with is like reducing the battery size and then thinking about portable charging also. It's like keeping charging station all across your corridor would not be possible. So we are talking few of the OEMs who can provide portable charging, or maybe this can look like a container. You go and it is equipped with the battery. It is equipped with the charger and the transformer also. So we are very eager and positive about this, that we'll solve this. We'll solve this with having another arrangements in the way when we move cargo from one place to another place. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand, for that. Jayant, you want to take that as well?
I'll be quick. The overarching answer to your question, Mani, is we got to have a very clear segregation of problems and the roadmap. And I would say that there is not a very integrated approach towards that because still a lot of things are being discussed in fragments, but there are some. So So there is a hope. It's not that we are going to be getting into that whirlpool. And the reason why I'm trying to tell you is that there are cities who are actually not looking just electric truck. There is a clear discussion on the combination of what's hydrogen, what's electric, and it's a combinatorial optimization problem from my perspective. And that optimization problem is not a universal. Rather, for the class of problem that you're talking about, you need to define it and you have to solve it. So that's how I see it.
Thank you. We'll give him an extra honor after the end of the event. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, Mr. Jain, you want to take it, or I'll skip my question. I pleaded my Fifth Amendment already. Thank you.
Yeah, in this case, my answer is two ways. Like, one is if you are increasing the weight, it's not going to only create an issue of this battery or loading. You see, you may think about your payment system, whether the design will take care, it starts eroding the material and again the resuspension. So there are many aspects comes, which maybe at that time you are not thinking. So this is another problem may emerge out. And another is to optimize. It's not necessarily like everywhere you have to change. You may go with the path like corridors where it can be optimized. Maybe within city you can think of electrification, but maybe on the major corridors, on the longer corridors, you can think of optimizing with the different ways. So I think that could be one way to resolve this problem.
I appreciate that, Suresh. Thank you. There was one more question from the lady. If you can announce your name and the organization it represents first, please. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Anand. If I understand you correctly, you started off by saying that I'm Purnima Gupta, former economic advisor, Government of India, and I have worked for long years in the transport sector, dealing with railways, Indian railways. So this intermodal, shift from road to rail and other issues, that's of great interest to me. I was in, presently what is Niti Aayog, I was working there on the railway sector. Now, when you started off, if I remember, if I understand you correctly, you said that any mode of transport based on green energy, on the first day of its movement on the road, the emissions are going to be higher as compared to a conventional, pro rata. That means same to same. Green energy based transport vehicle will have higher emissions as compared to. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Now, why did you say that? I'm not able to understand if you said that.
Research says that day one, when you build an electric car, you have to build batteries also. And the amount of carbon is emitted during the course of creating an electric car or creating an IC engine car. You emit more carbon when you create an electric car. So that is established. So day one, once you have a conventional car or you have a...
No, but just hold on. No, here, we are not talking about one day.
Can you come again, please?
Did you say on the first day? No, but why is it so important? I mean, a vehicle is supposed to have a long life. So why do we even think of that? Obviously, we know, everybody sitting here knows that there is a question of battery manufacturing, and even you may even look at the mode of manufacturing the batteries. You understand?
Yeah, I understood.
So if you keep on going into the backward linkages, there is no end to it. How the workers who came to the manufacturing establishment, how did they travel, their emissions, because you have to do a very thorough analysis right till the the first stage of the whole process. And why do you take that first day as having any sanctity at all? I'm not able to understand.
I'll tell you where I'm coming from.
A vehicle has a long life.
Yes.
Right?
It was nothing, sort of something negative linking to the day one. The perspective is that the medicine we give to the transportation sector is that you go EV and you're carbon neutral. That's not the case. You go EV and you have a bigger responsibility. The day one, So we are trying to address this at day one, that you have a bigger and better responsibility being an EV owner, that you have emitted more carbon. So now the solution is that you start thinking in terms of getting those green electrons rather than charging with the energy that has come from coal. 70% of time, by default, you are charging it from the energy that has come from coal.
I think that's a very negative perspective. I'm sorry.
You can.
I think you are not looking at the whole issue. If you want to look at a solution, you always present it as a positive option.
I'm not.
Not as a negative and then go back.
Look,
I'm sorry.
Ms.
I don't
Purnima,
agree with the perspective. I'm sorry.
Absolutely, you have a great point. There is a two-way.
No, this is no way to see. It's like saying, my child is very bright. He can do everything. He can do everything. But in maths, he gets a 0. That's no way to present your child. I'm sorry.
Excellent, comment, Ms. Purnima. Thank you for that. We would love to hear all your perspective. There are two ways to look at a glass half full or glass half empty, right? Thank you for looking at glass half full. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. It's nothing against EVs coming to the grid. It's from day one we are saying that you are more responsible. Be more responsible. Be a more responsible child, more responsible citizen, more responsible EV owner. That was the intention. If it has hurted you, I'm extremely sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think we could probably, your point totally well taken. I don't disagree with that. Yeah. I think, Ms. Purnima, we completely agree with your perspective. Let's close at that. Thank you. Thank you for your perspective. Let's continue that. In the interest of time, let's, Mr. Suresh, you wanted to take that real quick. If you don't want to, if you just want to take 1 minute real quick, and then we can wrap it up. Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to put some inputs from my side in this thing, what Anand says, what I understood is, if you understand the life cycle perspective, so manufacturing a vehicle with the electric vehicle, so their footprints are more at the manufacturing stage. When you start running it in the operational phase, you can reduce your footprints if you really brings lots of green, or you can say renewable energy. And then the final is the disposal of your batteries. If you take care, and that's, ma'am, like I just give you the example, our municipal corporations are not able to handle the normal garbage. It's a very basic thing. He's talking about something which is hazardous. If you are not going to take this seriously from the day first, the disaster, it's going to be a bigger disaster. I'm not saying positive or negative. I'm trying to say these are the three aspects are there, what I understood. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm...
Yeah. Or touch the baby too. So thank you. I appreciate that. I think, Ms. Purnima, the key comment there is the life cycle emissions. I think that message is very important from the audience perspective. Don't think about just the embodied emissions, what we call the embodied emissions, but look at life cycle emissions. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah. It is. Yeah. So we have to be respectful of the other session. So thank you as a moderator.
I just have one point to make. Maybe it'll add some value.
This is just getting more interesting. Maybe we should have made it another couple of hours.
My point is that where do you start from on the EV side? I'm not on the debate.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you be a little
My name is Sunil Wadhwa. I am ex-MD of Tata Power and GE Power.
Okay.
I do consulting now. I've been thinking about this EV business from a distance, and I'm looking at where to start and where then you mature into a much easier sort of understanding of this animal called EV. My perspective is on the infrastructure for EV charging that has to be built, which will also add to carbon footprint. My quick assessment is that for any let's say, interstate movement, let's say by trucks, if you need infrastructure, in the form of some fuel stations, filling stations, the payback period of that investment by the distribution company could be something like 500 years. It doesn't look very big, right? 500 years is the payback period, because the amount of infrastructure that has to be brought in to feed trucks, which is not on a guaranteed basis. So there has been some thought on this, where we have, when I was in GE, developed a model which has been patented. So I'm not marketing from GE at all. What it does basically is that on the highways, I'm trying to talk about where to start from. Start from where the load on the footprint, load on the capex, load on the cost is the lowest. So that your life cycle time on an overall basis becomes the shortest. Cost becomes the lowest. There are these transmission towers, lines at 765 kV, 440 kV of power grid, and this is important, please, of power grid, and because you took so much time on the debate, which I didn't know who was saying. So the 400 kV, even 220 kV or 765 kV towers, between them the lines, which are owned by state transmission companies or central transmission companies. There is a way to draw power.
I'll give you 30 seconds if you don't mind.
There's a way to draw power from those lines where the expenditure is the least. You have to select a particular spot for charging, which is nearest to a tower.
Okay.
This had been, hear me out, this has been approved by CERC for 10,000 towers of power grid and Sterlite. We have tested it. Why don't we start from there? There is no debate. I mean, you can go up to Leh Ladakh without the need for any solar, any distribution company to give you a connection. Over a period of time, you can add solar, because these are not agnostic. These are I mean, the EV is agnostic to whether it is thermal power, hydropower, or solar power. I think we are debating endlessly on something which is a problem which can be avoided. My only message is, think about it. Google CERC order on transmission towers usage. There are multiple uses for that. This is the latest use case, which even I would say there are a lot of people in MOP got thrilled. The problem is think.
Thank you. We understood the problem. Thank you so much. I mean, all comments are great. I think, Parul, we should note those requirements internally and see how best we can bring it.
Not the problem. Problems are too many.
Yeah, that's right. You don't find a solution unless you find the problem. So appreciate that. Those are great comments. We just made the session more interesting. I wish we had more time to cover. I would be very happy to kind of go through these issues and see how we can better address it. But, I think eventually, just to close this loop, I think each of the panelists did a fantastic job. My dad always, thank you so much. My father always used to say the first step in solving a problem is recognizing there is one. So thank you for all the attendees for your time and your patience to, not just listening to the audience, but also giving your perspective. I think it's very critical that we have a two-way engagement. With that, we formally close this session. I know there are people waiting for the other session. I think you want to kind of have, sure, Momento. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would request Mr. Girish Katikar, our moderator, to facilitate our speakers with the memento. I would invite Mr. Suresh Jain, Professor, IIT Tripati and IIT Delhi. Mr. Anand Singh, Assistant General Manager, ISGF. Mr. Jayant Kumar, Global Vice President, L&T PT&D Digital Solutions.